Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com. Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Radu Paramaru. I think I'm saying that right. He told me to say it however I want, but he is the Managing Director of Europe and Asia Pacific for Alcott Global. He's big on LinkedIn, definitely, if you haven't seen his name before. He's also the author of From Source to Sold, which is a great book on supply chain leaders, which we'll talk a little bit about today. And he's also the host of the Leaders in Supply Chain podcast as well, which has been around for quite some time, and we'll maybe dig into that a little bit too. So, Radu, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Kevin. Pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely.
And good job pronouncing my name any way you like. You did it wonderfully.
I tried my best. You tried to give me a little coaching beforehand there, but then you said just do what you want to do. So I tried as much as I could there. I appreciate that. So it's great to get you on the show here. Really interested to dig into some topics here and kind of get your perspectives on a few different things within the supply chain overall, since you're in touch with so many leaders and people throughout the space. But for people that maybe not familiar, why don't you give us kind of a brief overview of Alcott Global, who you work with, and kind of where your passion for logistics and supply chain comes from, because you do a lot of things in this space, and I'm curious what kind of drives that and where the background is for that.
So maybe first, Alcott Global is an executive search firm at the core that basically works with some of the largest manufacturing companies cross industries, as well as transport and logistics companies, to place C-level executives, board, as well as -1, -2 positions, right? So let's say a company like Danone is a client, for example, right? Large food company. So, we work a lot with their OO and their teams, as well as sometimes some of the positions within the countries and the commercial positions to place the people in key roles globally, as an example. So that's the core of the business. Now, perhaps more interesting for the listeners, even. I mean, of course, if there's executives listening to this and looking for jobs, feel free to to contact us, or if you're looking for talent, the other way also works. But how I ended up here, and that is the core of what we do. Like you rightfully mentioned, we've published a book with McKinsey. We have a partnership with World Economic Forum. We do face-to-face events where we gather executives to share problems and try to find solutions in smaller environments. We have a podcast. We have awards. We award the top 30 chief operations officers in the world. So there's a number of other projects that we do, and that is ultimately rooted. Those are rooted in the passion and the I think it's passion for the supply chain as a function, for operations as a function. And more specifically, how I ended up, it was completely by randomness. 10 years ago, when I ended up in recruitment, it was with a different firm first. In fairness, I didn't even know what is supply chain, but just as it so happens, my first client was a logistics company. And then I started doing searches, and then you kind of get to truly understand more and more as you do searches. So, this was a process over years. Yeah, it didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Just to be specific and clear here. And I think the second part which helped is that I'm curious by nature and I love learning. So actually the podcast, when we started 7-8 years ago, it was a way for me selfishly to learn more, because I got all these CEOs and CEOs on the podcast, and I was like, that's the best way to learn about an industry, because if somebody really gets it, they can explain it simply.
Yeah.
And the podcast was first and foremost, in fairness, for me at that point. and then second for the audience. In the meantime, it has, I mean, I like to think it has changed the order of priority,
Yeah.
but that's how I got to learn a lot, and I got more and more passionate. And over time, also what had happened, and again, this, I can't stress this enough, this happened over years. It's not just like one day I woke up. But the deeper I went, I really, really like the people in supply chain and logistics. In a sense, my background was management consulting. I dealt with a lot of different corporates across, whether it was financial services, whatever, healthcare services, hospitality, and manufacturing as well. I find by and large, and it's a big generalization, but by and large, people in supply chain, logistics, manufacturing, operations tend to be a lot more practical, pragmatic, get stuff done type of people, a lot less shiny sales, and sometimes politicians, right? If you go into some of these organizations that are more services oriented, they are very political driven. So just bad or good, but it's perhaps I prefer the people that are a bit more straightforward as a personal preference. So over time, I've made a lot of friends, obviously. I mean, now I have hundreds and thousands, and like you said, on LinkedIn we have so many people in all corners of the world, and the book has made its way to so many different people in 50 or 60 countries so far. So it's now it's really, the snowball has grown into an old avalanche, right? So obviously I'm completely biased right now of why I like this, but that's kind of how it grew, right, over time, if it makes sense. So I stumbled across supply chain by curiosity, learning, because I do like to be passionate about what I do. I got to know more and more. I got to know and make more and more friends. And now over the course of the 10 years, I have a lot of friends. And obviously, I know intimately, or I like to think I know intimately, their problems, also what they bring as value to the overall world. I do truly believe that supply chain is the place to be. I also believe that we're not telling the right stories or the strong enough narratives to make it sexy to the wider populations. Not yet. We've made some improvements, but we're not yet there. And therein lies the answer to a fairly long answer to your question.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, and I think it's such a great thing, and I love that you're saying sexy too. I mean, we say here that the warehouses are sexy, right? You see the shirt behind us here, but yeah, I mean, I think it's such a great thing, and I love to. I mean, we have some parallels here because I started my podcast for the same exact reason. I wanted to learn more about the warehousing industry, and it was just kind of a selfish way to to do that and talk to people. So, I mean, I think it's such an interesting thing, and I love the passion there, and I love the recognition too of people in this space being more practical, as you said, and more kind of getting it done, driven, I guess you could say, in a sense. And I love to see that you've created all these things surrounding that to be able to support that and help that and kind of drive that further interest and tell those different storylines, as you were mentioning too, and making it more of a point to say, hey, supply chain is important and it's here, and these people are doing really good work. So I think that's such a great thing. And I think it kind of ties into, something I saw on your profile there, where you say that you are, I think the quote is, you're a fervent believer that people are key in business, and I'm curious, obviously within supply chain and operations, I mean, there's such a human element and presence to that. So as you see that, and now we see all of this new technology coming into the space, whether it's in warehousing or supply chain as a whole, we see automation, AI, and robotics, they're playing a larger and larger role in supply chain, and it's pretty evident that they're here to stay, right? And in some cases, there's some thoughts, skepticism that they're replacing people, taking jobs. I mean, so with those kind of advancements in those types of technologies, I'm curious, how do you still see people still being a key part of keeping the world running through the supply chain?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
there's something I like to say, which is that technology doesn't make or break businesses. People do. At least for now.
Yeah.
I have not yet, I mean, whilst perhaps if I was Sam Altman from OpenAI, I would say the same. He said that we're going to see multi-billion-dollar businesses built in 10 people or 100 people. I mean, he threw out a number, and then somebody kind of ironically observed that, Mr. Sam, OpenAI has about 800 people. So if you guys with the best technology haven't quite made it, I mean, I don't know when is that point that you're going to make it. I forget the exact number, but definitely it was below 100. I think. So whilst I do think that absolutely it's happening, all that you have said, right? Yes, automation is happening. I don't want to get technical here. I mean, through AI, I'm not so sure it's happening, but there's a lot of machine learning for now. It's gonna. There's a lot of machine learning applications. There's a lot of different tech that takes away the repetitive tasks across supply chain that's already being implemented. That all is happening. And of course, people are being, you can say, replaced. I don't know if necessarily is the whole FT, right? The whole full-time employment. If that indeed, sure, in some cases it happens, those jobs are really not the most interesting jobs, because the jobs that go away are the repetitive, pretty brain dead type of jobs, right? I don't know, including if you have to copy paste an Excel from here to there and you do SAP implementations. I mean, in fairness and in reality, even if sometimes the most advanced tech companies are not necessarily communicating across business units, you end up doing stuff that are extremely manual, even if you do have access to the most advanced tech. So what I'm saying is that yes, it's happening. I think it's technology. Clearly, I don't think anybody is here to say that we're going back to pen and paper. Everything is more and more digital. However, I would argue that people are even more important, because ultimately, who makes this happen? People do. I mean, now again, I'm not saying that all people or all jobs are created equal. That's a distinction, right? Because obviously the person that is now moving from one box of Excel to another, that I would be extremely anxious if I had that job. But the person that runs let's say the processes, that understands the digital layer, that understands how do you now reconcile the two systems. I'm giving an example. Reconcile the two systems, so that person that is just moving Excel information no longer needs to exist, because you just, you do that integration properly. Again, I mean, silly example. That person, though, is extremely valuable, more valuable than ever before, because the ability to make things happen across fairly large and smaller and mid-sized companies in a digital first environment, that's a key that is worth millions, literally. Because you save, you become more efficient. But that is a person, right? I mean, I'm simplifying here. There's many different other roles in that kind of scope, but the people that are able to make change happen, that are digital savvy, and that have a good understanding of how do you basically combine all of this. And of course, I'm not discounting. You need to have good old supply chain skills. I mean, you need to have end-to-end supply chain. I mean, you're not gonna do and manage to pull off an automation project in a warehouse if you don't know how to operate a warehouse. That's silly, right? I mean, also, I mean, yes, we talk about AI and so on, but I dare anybody try to just go with ChatGPT or whatever most advanced AI that they have. Somebody who's never operated a warehouse, you try to put an automation system in place. I mean, come on, like you can't do that. I mean, you are likely to fail. So what I'm saying is the people that element, I would argue, Kevin, is more important now in an age where technology is taking over the dumb jobs. I'm sorry, I mean, maybe it's a little bit exaggerated. The brain dead jobs. Then you need very smart people, right? That know how to best use it, how to best use technology.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point too, and I love the fact that you kind of highlighted there. the person that's in the spreadsheet, right, is should be a little nervous, but the person that's able to kind of put all those things together and piece those different digital components together is really like where that value is at. So I'm curious, as you're talking to a lot of people there who are trying to develop their career and trying to find jobs at a higher level. I mean, how do you recommend for people to be able to develop and kind of recognize that value and put those skills together to be able to kind of, I guess, be ready for that next level that's coming eventually?
Let me start with an example of
Sure.
who mostly gets, let's say we do a CEO job. Let's try to stick with a bit more tactical. So let's say chief operations officer job or chief supply chain officer, chief procurement officer.
Mm-hmm.
When we do those type of searches, ultimately, those candidates that get it, you know why they get it, Kevin? As the common line.
Mm.
They get it not because they are the best at even connecting dots.
Yeah.
Even connecting different digital layers, or they definitely don't get it because they are the best we procurement, or supply chain folks. No, they don't. Even if I know a lot of the listeners here, especially the younger you are in your career, we tend to have these limiting beliefs in my mind.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, technical expertise is amazing. I mean, the better I get at optimizing my warehouse, the higher I'll get in the organization. No, you won't. I mean, yes, you will up to a point, right, where you maybe manage that warehouse. But the more you go into leadership, the difference is made. And the reason why these people get the job versus other people that don't get the job is the ability to connect to what's the pain of the organization hiring them. What is the challenge? What are they trying to fix? The way that you get to the pain, yes, of course, I'm a headhunter in the process, so I do tell them, because I do know, let's say, as Alcott, we don't know some of those things. But even more important than that is, how do you engage with the interviewer, right? The CEO, the board who's hiring you in the interview process. How do you get them to communicate to you? That's one, because people need to feel listened. Very basic stuff, yeah. And heard. And then the second part, perhaps even more important, is how do you then share with them how you can help them? It's like that basic, but yeah, that sharing part, Evan, is like you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to tell a narrative of how did you do that in the past? And that narrative should not be, oh my God, I optimized this network and I maximized my utilization of trucks and I decreased cost by 5%. No CEO or board will be really interested in that. Even if that at the core is obviously your day-to-day fundamental job, yeah?
Yeah.
What they will be interested in stuff like, okay, look, I help the CEO increase margin, increase profitability, serve our clients better, which resulted in bigger business, increase market share. That's what they care about.
Yeah.
So the ability to communicate properly to the points that the board and the CEO wants to hear is the most important thing that makes these people get these jobs. So I would say, now back to your question, the soft skills are the hard skills.
Yeah.
In a sense that, again, fundamentally, if you want to be a CFO, you'd better understand accounting. Fundamentally, and know how to do it. Fundamentally, if you want to become a global head of warehousing for whatever big company, Amazon, I mean, you'd better understand kind of how to run a warehouse. Yeah. I'm not discounting basics. But to be able to make it as a global head of Amazon, that is really just the hygiene factor knowledge. That what you need to build upon is first also and we talk about it in the book, right? The chain model. First is also how do you build your networks inside the company, right? Because each step, the higher you get, it's yes about how you know, but it's who you know in the company and who does support you to get that promotion, right? And then also the peers and the bosses and the teams that make you successful. Second is also about the ability to, how do you tell the right narrative, right, to drive your organization forward? Because it's not, again, you're not going to inspire people to say, oh my God, let's automate this warehouse by another 1%. Yeah, that will not get people out of bed. I mean, normal people, maybe geeks, yes.
Yeah.
But I would not. I don't know about you, but I mean, you've got to tell a narrative that's a little bit more inspiring, right? So whether that is, look, because we do this, we're going to be able to serve more kids. I mean, I'm making it up, yeah. But again, that ability to tell a compelling narrative is crucial for your team. And more important, the ability to influence. So chain model, right? N stands for narrative. I'm going through a little bit backwards now. I stands for influence. The influencing piece of your peers, right? How do you influence? Okay, you're global head of warehousing, but you don't just get budgets out of ether, right? I mean, there's a CEO that gives you budget. There's, some other peers that benefit from it, whether it's marketing, sales, whatever, advertising, right? The ones that sell the product in the case of Amazon. I mean, you got to influence them to say, look, if you give me that budget, ultimately we all win, right? And you get more. These skills are not hard skills if you follow my logic, Kevin. It's actually soft skills. And I think what most people kind of fail to, again, the more you grow in age and in career, I think these things become more and more evident. But maybe earlier on is less evident. But that's what it is about. Yes, you should have a fundamental, good principle understanding of the job. I'm not denying that that's important. It is.
Yeah.
But then the soft side of communication, influencing, telling a story, end-to-end understanding. How do you work with your peers, with your stakeholders, with your teams? That becomes a lot more important in any leadership role.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's such a interesting perspective. And I love that you kind of pointed that out, because I mean, those soft skills are certainly so important, because as you get, I think, to higher and higher levels in your career, it becomes more and more important to be able to, like you said, to be able to have that influence and be able to leverage other people that you need to work with to make things happen and make those things come together. And, just having the technical knowledge and just, thinking that like, oh, well, I know everything, right? And, I'm the best gift to everybody here. Like, I mean, it's never going to allow you to accomplish anything, right? I mean, you need to be able to work with people.
It allow you to be the best individual expert.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a rocket scientist, I mean, that person perhaps is not necessarily needs to be the most inspirational. I mean, you put her in a corner.
Yeah.
Let them do their magic. Okay.
Yeah.
But the moment that you ask the same person with that skill set to lead and inspire an organization of hundreds, thousands of people, well, that changes. I mean, it's think about it when you went to school. I mean, now you're a professor.
Yeah.
When you and I went to school, I'm sure that we all had these amazing professors, teachers that were like, wow. I mean, you can see that they're brainy, yeah?
Yeah.
You can't understand a thing of what they're saying. I mean, like, I have no clue what they just said. Like, I don't remember anything. And the ones that you actually remember after all these years, 20, 30 years, and look back in high school, in primary school, in university, are the ones that were able to connect, to inspire, to tell a narrative, to tell a story, to connect to real life. Like, look, this is how this thing that I'm teaching you actually connects, right?
Yeah.
There's not so many, but this is how it links, actually. It's the same. The best leaders are the best storytellers, are the best ones to tell narratives that inspire people and to get stuff done.
Yeah. I think that's such a great example there. And I will say too, like I hear that from my students all the time too, because they have professors who, have been, through academia, and that's their career, right? And they're like, well, we actually like hearing from you because you've actually worked and done the things that we're learning about in school, and it's more easier to connect, and you're translating in a way that we can see. Like, you say like, oh, well, actually this topic that we're talking about today, like this happened to me when I worked for X company, and we did this and we had this issue, and this is why we had the issue, and all these things. And I think that connection, like you said, and building those narratives does help it so much more. And I think that's just the human mind too. I mean, we like a story, right? I mean, I think I saw you went to school for psychology, right? So I mean, you understand that. So I mean, it's doing that and having that kind of perspective, being able to create those narratives allows for those connections, I think, to happen more, and more of that understanding and like you said, that influence too, to be able to push somebody to do something more, which I think is very interesting. So really interesting insights there from you on that perspective and looking at that. But I guess back on the topic of technology in the supply chain chain space. I'm curious. I mean, as you see out there, and you guys had a white paper that came out around technology as well, and obviously you're talking to lots of people in the space. I mean, what kind of technologies do you think are really exciting or grabbing your attention right now in the supply chain space, and what are people really talking about a lot that you talk to?
So I'll quickly answer, and then I'll share some parallel thoughts.
Sure.
And we actually have an arm in Alcott, which is called Simplify. We have a kind of a separate arm. Andre is leading that from our team. Where basically he aggregated this 1,000 plus software tech related scale-ups and startups that fix different problems across supply chain, where it's planning, automation in warehousing, automation in factories, whatever, sensors, visibility, and so on. And he's quite busy with that. Now, there's big themes, and we've done it also in the rightfully said survey. People can find it in our website. So I don't think I'm going to say anything mind-blowing here. So I'll just quickly mention, of course, everybody talks about AI.
Yeah.
And also, of course, I haven't quite seen anybody that truly uses AI. So this, I just want to also paint distinctions, right? Because there's a lot of people claiming, not that I'm an expert, don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert in tech, but I know a lot of super smart people that are.
Yeah.
So far, I have not yet come to hear somebody saying, yes, this company truly is using AI in supply chain.
Yeah.
But yeah, machine learning, yes, and algorithms, yes.
Yeah.
But okay, so obviously a lot of people talk about AI. Visibility has been a thing that there's different tools that you can achieve that. Automation, and perhaps even more is affordable automation, right? It's like, because automation can be extremely expensive. And in fairness, there's most markets, it doesn't really make sense still. I mean, if you look in Asia, I mean, maybe Japan, Korea, the rest, I mean, it's, why would you automate in fairness? Because the labor is, it takes you 10 years to take your money back, right? US, yeah, absolutely, sure. Europe, yeah, it makes more sense, but there's a lot of markets where it doesn't make sense. And okay, the list goes on. So I'll stop there for a second, because I don't think I'm not a techie myself, so I don't think I'm going to add a lot of value. So there's all this tech. Yes, everybody talks about tech. Absolutely. We tend to focus on the next shiny thing. I remember 6-7 years ago, I interviewed Yossi Sheffi, which is an amazing professor at MIT.
Yeah.
And I asked him at that point about blockchain. And he said, right with this. I've seen so many things come and go. This is just another thing that will come and go. I don't see any application in supply chain. Now, remember, this was 5, 6, 7 years ago when, blockchain is like, oh my God, this is going to revolutionize. Well, fast forward to today, it hasn't really revolutionized anything, right?
No.
I think AI definitely it's not comparing apple to apple. AI will definitely change a lot of things. But my point here is something else. My point is that we talk a lot about tech. We have our own conferences, which we only started because I was fed up with this. You go to a conference and there's like, people on stage, wow, this X tech, mind blowing. Well, that Y tech, wow, I mean, it's just, you switch it on, your whole organization's, you're competing with Amazon, man. Like literally, like, sure, like that ever works. So back to the quote, tech for the sake of tech, I don't think it works. And I think a lot of people do that. Like, the board is like, oh yeah, I also saw AI. Hey, what are you guys doing for AI? And then the CEO has to show that they're doing something about AI. Yeah, but fundamentally, what is tech? It's a tool, right? It should solve a problem. So the fundamental question that still organizations fail to ask first and foremost is, what are you trying to do, man? What are you trying to fix? What's the case study or application? Oh, we want to do AI, but for what? You have a hammer, everything is a nail. Like start from the other side, right? I mean, you have to have a problem, and then you go, well, what's the most useful, fastest, most efficient tech to fix this? So case in point, I had Cheryl Capps, amazing professional. She is, literally done from building rockets for NASA to the last job that she just retired is at Corning, which is one of the leading edge engineering companies. Now she sits on a lot of boards, and she was telling me how in Corning they had a problem of not themselves. It's a big problem for most people, most companies. Risk, right? How do you, how do you are able to pick up signals to tell you stuff that, okay, maybe I shouldn't buy from here. Geopolitics has all of a sudden blown up in all our faces in supply chain in the last 1 to 3 years, and it's here to stay. How can you pick up the signals that tell you first, or among the first, that, okay, look, we're going to get a ban on copper from China, again, example, I'd better have another source, or two, three. Or, I mean, the Houthis are attacking ships and shooting missiles. Well, I'd better, if I need something critical, I'd better be the first to buy air freight, because then the price is still okay, rather than I 10x the price, or, I need to do some rerouting. So having that information first is important. And she was sharing with me that first start with the problem, not with the shiny tech. So first, that's the problem. Okay, well, what are some of the options that we have? And then they looked at different software providers. They chose one. And now, again, a point that I want to make for a lot of the people listening. And I do know that you're with it. You talked about SAP and Oracle. I think the days are beginning to be long gone of multi-year, lengthy implementations. Now, of course, an ERP implementation is probably the most complex you can do. A risk mitigation software is not as complex. But fundamentally, the new softwares have become easier and easier to deploy. So she was able, in this case, to deploy it in 4 to 6 weeks. And I think that's also limiting beliefs in the minds of a lot of professionals. This takes time. I don't want to shake the boat. I mean, it's going to be too complex. Come on, start. I mean, and she also didn't start globally, right? I mean, if you want to implement an automation in your factories, you don't go all your factories at once. You start with one, right? I mean, come on. Again, I'm just stating principles, but I see professionals get lost in the weeds. So she started, small first, 4 to 6 weeks already. She could see results and show results to her chief procurement officer, to the CEO, say, hey, look, because of this, we already saved. You want me to continue? Duh. That balance of short, long term, right? Because again, some like, oh yes, in 3 years we'll get benefits, and you try to sell that to the board. The board will be like, hey, thanks, but I'm on a quarter earnings, so 3 years is a bit long. So you need to show short-term impact as well as the long-term impact. So she did that, and within 3 months it was implemented, and not implemented globally. And not only that, she was becoming a profit in their map of the world, because all of a sudden she could show bottom line tangible savings that would cover the whole budget of that particular team.
Oh wow!
So these are the things. So if I can summarize, don't put the cart in front of the horse. Tech is a tool, not the ultimate solution to anything, right? Unless you have a problem. So get very clear on what's your problem. It's the same in hiring, by the way, Kevin. A lot of hiring that fails fundamentally fails not because the ultimate candidate that gets hired is bad necessarily. It's because the people that hire have not fully aligned on what are they hiring for. And you go through these processes, and then they hire somebody, and it's like, because there's matrix organizations, right? So one of them is like, I don't think we made the right choice. And then there's also politics. So you are the one, the other one is the one. But did you guys sit down and really agree what you're trying to hire for at the beginning, right? So see, when we come into play, we really try to do that part well. Even then, we sometimes, in fairness, we struggle. But back to tech, are you clear on your problem? If you're clear on your problem, if the stakeholders are clear, that's 80% of the journey done, I would dare say. Then the actual choosing of the right tool, sure, I mean, it's important, and you should better choose the right partner and so on. But it comes in some ways, it flows in a logical sequence. If you try to do the other way around, okay, we really need to fix something with AI, you've put the cart in front of the horse.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great way to put it, because it is sometimes like you said, the board is like, oh, AI, like what are we doing about AI? AI is here, right? And I get questions like that too. Like, people will ask me, because the podcast is all about warehousing. They're like, oh, what's AI doing in the warehouse? And I'm like, well, it's not just like you just drop AI in and things are, everything's good, right? It's not that simple. And I think it's great to put it in the way that you did. I mean, looking at tech as a tool to solve an actual problem that exists, right? Not put tech in place just because everybody's talking about AI, right? Or everybody's talking about visibility. So let's get something with visibility, right? But what does that even mean at the end of the day? And what do you want to be visible, right? Define that problem to the extent where you can get that actual tool that's going to be in the right place. And I think that's such a great way to put it.
And just think for a second, Kevin, we demonize, or quite a few of the tech companies demonize Excel.
Yeah.
You're primitive, you use Excel. We have this AI. Like, come on. It's not Stone Age, man, Excel. No. We have AI, machine learning. Look at this beautiful dashboard.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you actually need that beautiful, shiny, blinking dashboard?
Yeah.
Or is a macro in Excel good enough for where you're at, because your information, your data sucks, it's dirty, it's like, what do you deploy an AI for if your data quality sucks? Like, what good does it do? It gives you fit faster, basically. That's what it does.
Yeah.
You make mistakes, and now you're going to make mistakes faster.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where. And this links a little bit to something I'm going to reshare, actually. Supply chain is not a game of Simon Says. In a sense that supply chain professionals also, some of them, also need to grow more confidence and courage and ability, need to work on their ability to stand up for what is right. So a lot of times it's a game of Simon Says. The CEO says something, the general manager of the business says something, and then supply chain is like, okay, I follow boss. And that's not the way. I mean, supply chain ultimately is a partner, is not just a blind executor. Because sometimes you got to go back and say, hey, look, this doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense because of A, B, C. And this is how it's going to hurt your business. Sure, I can do it, but do you really want me to do it?
Yeah.
Case in point, company making the soap at McDonald's. Let's not name them. But I mean, I don't know if I've not really paid attention to the color of the soap when you go and wash your hands at McDonald's. But apparently they always bought red. I forget the colors, but let's just say that they bought red. So the general manager comes and says, hey, I need red disinfectant or soap for McDonald's. And then the head of supply chain goes and says, we don't have red. Take yellow. Yeah. Right? I mean, we have plenty of stock of yellow. It's an oversupply. It's standing there, it's sitting, it's basically costing us money, right?
Yeah.
For storing, sell that. The GM says, are you kidding? I mean, it's impossible. Boom, 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 boom. And then the head says, kidding you? I mean, do you actually think that McDonald's will come back and ask you, oh, you sold me yellow. Oh, this is terrible. Like the client, I'll lose sales. For the color of my soap. I mean, you really think that will happen? And if you really think, why don't you just ask McDonald's, right? And then they ended up in some sort of a conflict that was only resolved at the CEO level, right? Because the head of supply chain. Now, structures are also important. So I will make that disclaimer that in this particular organization, it was a regional head of supply chain. It was a general manager for a cluster. So they were on a peer level, right? Had the supply chain reported the GM this conversation, probably at some point, you can only argue that much. But in this particular case, the head of supply chain went to the CEO, their common boss, and said, look, actually, we make the sale on time, right? Rather than me having to, all of a sudden scramble capacity just to make a different color. 2, you're getting rid of excess inventory that is just sitting there, right? It was a simple decision for the CEO who wasn't attached on this particular client like the general manager. But my overall point is supply chain is not a game of Simon Says.
Yeah.
We got to take on that role of partners to the business, which means that we advise the business as supply chain experts in what is right for the business, right? And we use influencing skills, the chain model that we discussed briefly about, to make that happen. Okay. Sometimes still it won't be possible, but most of the times it will, and most of the times common sense does prevail.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we sometimes lose that common sense a little bit. We get so into the weeds on things, as you mentioned earlier, and I mean, I think that example is such a a great example, and it's such a funny thing to think, like, because looking from the outside perspective, I mean, you do see it like right away. It's like, oh, what's the big deal, right? Soap, the color of the soap, like, is not a huge deal, but the person that's like, intimately involved in that and, pushing for that is like, oh, this is a total disruption, right, of what we normally do. And at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal. And I think it's really good to have that perspective and see that and be able to kind of see the bigger picture and perspective as well, and take that step back. So really interesting talking to you today, Radu, and learning about all these different things and getting these great insights and takeaways from you within regards to supply chain and technology, and ultimately the foundation of the supply chain, which is the people themselves as well, to be able to learn about that. So I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to me about all these different things. And it's been great to learn from you and hear about some of these perspectives too. If people are interested in connecting with you or learning more about Alcott Global, I mean, what's the best way to go about that?
LinkedIn is the easiest. LinkedIn to find me is the easiest, and Alcott is it's obviously online, and you can find on LinkedIn. But I would definitely say book is an incredible resource, and it's not a selfish plug here, but what we did with the book, right? Because we didn't have a lot of time to speak about it, but what we did, we interviewed some of the best CEOs that came from supply chain and operations, as well as the CEOs and CSCs in the world that made it at the board level, and we asked them pretty much the simple question: what made you successful as a supply chain and operations professional? So that book is ultimately a compilation. It's a leadership book. It's not a supply chain book per se. My daughter, 11, started reading it. Then she got pissed that she's not in the book and threw it away. But okay, that's a different problem I have to fix with my daughter. But it's an easy read. It's not full of formulas. It's really, some of the best in the world, what made them successful. And they all came from supply chain. So I would say it's a very good one. And I'll separately discuss with you, because we have for students, we have a very specific, a way in which we offer something for academia and the student side, because our intent when we wrote the book together with Knut from McKinsey was really, how can we inspire people and share some of these good careers, good stories that hopefully give a menu list of people of, look, this is basically the possibilities in operations and supply chain. This is how the best people in this have done. Maybe you can take some inspiration from it and do it yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic way to look at it, and a great perspective too to highlight those kinds of things, especially from, I guess, the supply chain side as well, because often we see, I think, leaders, but not necessarily the supply chain leaders highlighted as much. And I think that's a great thing too, even from the academia student perspective, to say like, hey, supply chain is a big deal. Like, you should be interested in this potentially and have some focus on it as well. So definitely, if you haven't had a chance to check out the book already, from source to sold, make sure you do get it and take a read. And Radu, I want to thank you once again for your time on the show today, and we're looking forward to future conversations as well. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.